Okay, we've survived Christmas and we've survived New Year. It won't be long until we get the new car launches and testing starts. Which of course means it's time for us to start speculating on what the major stories of the 2022 season might be. First up, what role will we see George Russell play at Mercedes this year? Welcome back, Formula One fans, to another video. Plenty of us were jumping for joy when Mercedes announced that they'd signed George Russell as their new driver for 2022, replacing Valtteri Bottas. He's going to be one to watch this year, and it feels like a natural progression, having seen him forcibly drag his Williams out of the bottom spot for the past season. But how did he get to this level? Having taken up karting at age 7, he soon took multiple championships.
Second, here comes Russell up the inside of Phibbs through Stratford hairpin on the last lap, and Phibbs has allowed Russell up the inside, possibly to take that third and final podium spot. What can Phibbs do about it? I think George Russell is going to be far too experienced.
2014 saw him graduate to single-seaters in Formula Renault 2.0 and Formula 4, coming fourth in the former and winning the latter. The next year he started in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, and this is the first time he was approached about signing for Mercedes by team principal Toto Wolff. He had the choice between Carlin and Volkswagen, or Mercedes and a German team called Muck Motorsport. Interestingly, George felt that the British team Carlin was a better fit for him, and it would give him more of a leg up than the German Muck Motorsport. He emailed Toto to thank him for his advice, but thanks but no thanks, and he'd be driving with Carlin as it would be better for his career, confident that if he did well, Mercedes would still be interested. Toto replied to say he thought George was making the wrong decision, but they'd stay in touch. George drove well for Carlin, finishing 6th in 2015 and 3rd in 2016, and Carlin finished the championship in 2015 in 4th place, ahead of Muck Motorsport in 5th by 36.5 points. Clearly George was right that Mercedes would still be interested, as he joined the Mercedes Junior Driver Programme in 2017, the same year he moved to and won the GP3 series. As part of the Mercedes Juniors, he took part in the F1 testing at Budapest and drove the Force India car in FP1 at the Brazilian Grand Prix. He impressed Mercedes and Force India enough to also pick up the drive in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix FP1. In 2018, George stepped up to F2 and promptly won that title as well. He was also confirmed as the Mercedes reserve driver for the year, a role he shared with Pascal Wehrlein, and Force India had him as their Pirelli tyre test driver at the test after the F1 Spanish Grand Prix in May. This meant that when he was finally signed for an F1 team in the 2019 season, expectations were really high. Unfortunately, he signed for Williams. Williams are of course a team that are synonymous with Formula One, but they've also been a team in decline for some years now. George joined as teammate to Robert Kubica, but the Williams FW42 was the slowest car on track, and really the two were only competing against each other rather than the rest of the field. George's best finish of the year was 13th at the rain-soaked German Grand Prix, which became an 11th place finish after both Alfa Romeos were penalised post-race for using driver aids. George only just missed out on his maiden F1 points when he was overtaken by Kubica in the closing laps. Ultimately, George finished the season 20th in the championship and was the only driver in the field not to score a point. 2020 saw Kubica replaced at Williams with Nicholas Latifi, and George began his Mr. Saturday reputation by showing his ability, especially in the wet, to drag the car into a reasonable qualifying position. He even started in 11th at the Styrian Grand Prix, but quickly lost his chance of points when he ran wide into the gravel in the early laps. 2020 was a mixed bag for George, with some real highlights, especially in qualifying, and he truly showed his potential, but balanced it out with some real errors, the worst of which being at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, where he was sat in a handy 10th place behind the safety car until he crashed into the wall while trying to keep his tyre temperature up.
George Russell there, little bump, you could see you could just see where the tarmac was changing.
So once again, the safety car absolutely changing the face of this race.
Don't know what to say.
However, the few rookie errors he did show weren't enough to stop Mercedes giving him an epic promotion at the Sakhir Grand Prix. With Lewis unable to compete after contracting the Rona, George got to stand in and drive the Mercedes for one race only. His performance was outstanding, qualifying in second behind Bottas and promptly leading most of the race from lights out. And yes, some will trundle out the old "it's the car" argument, but given that you'd expect a driver in a brand new car to at least be behind his teammate, I think George proved that he has the driving skills to handle the Merc. Tragically, a cock-up from Mercedes cost George his maiden win, a win he utterly deserved, when they fitted Bottas's tyres to George's car, prompting both cars to have to re-pit after just one lap and costing them significant time. A good finish could have been salvaged, as George managed to make up multiple places in the closing laps, only for him to pick up a slow puncture, forcing him to pit once more. He ultimately finished in 9th, collecting his first championship points. Few races have given me stress the way the 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix did. The confidence shown in him in 2020, both from Williams and Mercedes and the F1 fans, clearly gave George a boost for 2021, and coupled with a car that was actually starting to show ability, albeit only outperforming the Haas and the Alfa Romeo most weekends, he solidified his role as Mr. Saturday, pulling his Williams into Q2 and even Q3 in qualifying, and proving his speed comes from his driving more than his car. Unfortunately, over the longer races, the Williams still struggled and had reliability issues, and Sundays must have been frustrating to George last year. We saw flashes of how he didn't handle this well, especially at that year's Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, where George collided with Bottas while attempting an overtake. Yeah, you heard me, George Russell in a Williams was trying to overtake Valtteri Bottas in a Mercedes, and both smashed quite spectacularly into the barrier. Thankfully, both walked away unhurt, but George showed that he has a temper, lashing out and accusing Bottas of being at fault. He did recant the accusation after a few days, but his petulance was not a good look, especially when the incident was so clearly his fault. The weirdest and second most frustrating result of the season came at Spa, where wet qualifying put George starting in second on the grid. On Sunday the rain wouldn't let up, and a bizarre parade behind a safety car for just 2 laps was controversially deemed a race by the FIA, and as a result, George got his first podium and Williams got their best finish in years. The latter part of the season was weaker for George, with him suffering a couple of retirements and just a weaker performance overall, with the car suffering more reliability issues. So what does this all mean for the coming 2022 season? It means I am really excited. Given George's one-off performance in the Merc in 2020, I cannot wait to see him back behind the wheel of one of the Silver Arrows. He clearly has the skills. His titles racked up over the years as he skipped through the lower formulas, and his performance in the uber-weak Williams have shown that he is a talented driver. However, he's also shown a temper and impatience at times, so how will he handle going from the worst car on the grid to the best? How will he find his place as teammate to 7-time world champion and fellow Brit Lewis Hamilton? That's a dynamic I really can't wait to see. Will we see a clear first driver, second driver divide between the two? George has shown he can truly be a team player, never more obvious than last year at the Hungarian Grand Prix when he told his engineer to sacrifice his race if it meant teammate Nicky getting more points for the team. But that was a race where Latifi was running ahead of George. He's also shown that he isn't scared to push when he believes he's in the stronger position, as evidenced by his run-in with Bottas. Despite having clocked up 3 years in F1, George is still a relatively young driver, and he has some growing up to do. But at the same time, he comes across as a very likeable young man. He's close with several other drivers on the grid and forms part of one of the most adorable buddy groups in F1 alongside Lando Norris, Alex Albon and Charles Leclerc. Can we see George find a balance between his affable, easygoing nature we see in interviews and team videos, and his drive and determination we've seen when he battles rivals, cars and the weather on track? I really hope so. I cannot wait to see 2 phenomenal drivers in the same team, fighting at the top end of the grid. Regulation changes and new car designs mean we could see a lot more teams competing for the points this year, which is thrilling to think about. But I genuinely want to see George qualifying on the front row and leading races. He's proven he deserves a car good enough to let him do that. He has his failings, and being Lewis Hamilton's teammate could be a rude awakening for him, but I think we'll see George step up to the challenge. What do you think, Formula 1 fans? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching!
Unbelievable to get back into the Mercedes Formula 1 car.